end of the church year, we hear things about the end of the world, the end of time. And so today we have, at least from the gospel, a little bit of that, what we would call apocalyptic speaking and teaching that Jesus expresses because he wants people to understand that God's intention is eventually to bring things to completion, to perfect what has already been begun, and to inaugurate this whole new way of living. But as the problem was in the early church, so for some people it continues to be today, that when is all of this supposed to happen? What are the signs that this is supposed to happen? And invariably, every time there's a set of cataclysmic events, such as now with the fires in California and earthquakes and other kinds of things going on in other parts of the world, when things seem to be so severe and so out of our control, there are those who begin to say, well, these are all the signs that this is being fulfilled. There are some who interpret the fact, and this is not intended to be a political statement, but just an observation, that the present administration in Washington is also a sign that the world is going to come to an end pretty soon because of the particular thrusts of this president and his administration and what they've done with Israel and things like that. And they're all sort of working to see how this prophecy and that statement over there all fit into this nice, neat pattern so we can say that Jesus is coming at any moment. He may very well be coming at any moment. But we don't know that for sure. We don't know when, and we're not supposed to know when, and we're not supposed to be sitting around trying to guess when. What we're called to do is to live this gift that we've been given, that we're called to live this faith, not try to, decipher when everything is going to happen. Because if we're living this faith in the first place, we don't have to worry about when it's going to happen. If it happens now, or it happens 1,000 years from now, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. The only thing we can do is what we are here doing this morning and what we do when we leave here and go through the rest of the week, which is to live out this gift of faith, this gift of love, this gift of hope, and not to be worried so much about things that are, first of all, beyond our knowledge and also then beyond our control. We have to concentrate on the promises that have been made to us and the faith that we're called to live, and not to get all caught up in all kinds of other things. Now, reading from 1 Samuel this morning about Hannah conceiving Samuel. That's all about the promise of God and how the work of God, the plan of God, if you will, works out over a long period of time. Last week we heard the reading that featured Ruth. And Ruth figures into salvation history because of having married into Naomi's family, and she becomes the great-grandmother of King David. It took a long time to get to that point. And it took an even longer time to get to the point where we are now. God works out things slowly, but God is faithful to the promises that have been made to us, so that we don't have to ever be afraid that somehow or other we have been duped into believing something that's not true. Or that God somehow is insensitive. Or that God somehow couldn't care less about this creation of His. Because everything that the Lord has done down through the ages has been for this people who've been called together. You know, during diocesan convention, and we have a couple of people here this morning who were there, so they can correct me if I'm wrong. We heard a lot of different things, but perhaps one of the primary things that we heard was from Ray Suarez. You might recognize the name. He used to be on National Public Radio. Sometimes he still does little special segments. Right now he's teaching at a university, but he was the keynote speaker at the convention. And he's been an Episcopalian since he was a kid. And so he's seen the church go from what it once was to what it is now. And he also has seen things in our culture for what they were and where they are now. And all the kinds of tensions and struggles that all Christian denominations and churches have right in the here and now because of the changes that are going on in people's lives in this culture of ours, the increased secularization, the numbers of people who've been raised with no religion whatsoever, and maybe several generations of that, and how now the millennials and others have to be convinced that there's a reason, and a good reason, to risk walking through the church's doors. Because there have been decisions made about Christians in general, not necessarily about Episcopalians, but about Christians in general being intolerant, being homophobic, being this, being that. Whatever is the trend of the day, we're against it somehow as Christians. Or at least some group of Christians is. And when they are asked their perception of a Christian, they give you that whole negative litany. And when you try to respond, as he was sharing with us, they always have some other thing that they can say. One young man said to him, you know, if I go into the church and on this given day and I hear this and I believe this, you know, why do I need to come back again? I got it. You know, all I got to do is come once and I can get it. I can get what Jesus teaches. I can get what it's all about. I don't need to come back again. That's, you know, kind of a challenging attitude. And then there's also, excuse me, there is also that the attitude that was expressed by one saying, you know, if you could guarantee me a meeting with Jesus on a Sunday morning, I mean, really meeting Jesus on a Sunday morning, now that I would show up for. Whether I'd come back more than once, I don't know. But I'd show up for that. Or maybe it was the bishop that said it, but whatever. You know, the bishop, when he referred to it anyway, said, well, you know, that's what this is ultimately all about, isn't it? Meeting Jesus here? Isn't Christ present here? But that's the perception of so many people, that this group that gathers together does whatever it does, says whatever it says, goes out the door and forgets about it or whatever, or continues to just live in such a way that it negates whatever promises were made. It negates anything that Jesus did for us, as we hear in the letter to the Hebrews today. It negates the importance of any place to gather, because what goes on is irrelevant to so many other people. And that's why when we get distracted by these kinds of things and speculations, what we're actually doing is derailing the possibility that we have of making a difference in the world by living out our faith. Because we bring discredit on the very gospel that we say we believe, and that forms us and shapes us and makes a difference to us. You know, a few years ago when Harold Camping, excuse me, from Family Radio made his prediction that I don't remember if it was May 15, 2012, that the world was supposed to come to an end, and it didn't. You know, how many people ridiculed him, and then he even made it worse by saying, oh, I miscalculated, it's going to be in October. It didn't happen then either. You know, so this kind of stuff, or interpreting all these other signs, that this is going to happen any moment now, and that's why we have to support these things that sometimes seem unjust, unfair, you know, just plain wrong, because it has to all work to put into place all the pieces of the puzzle so that Jesus will come back. It's really giving us an awful lot of power over God and over God's sovereignty and over God's will. God will do what God will do, but God is faithful to promises made. God promised that through the work of Samuel, that this people would come together, that this people would be formed and shaped, and they were under their kings. And through later events, through the prophets, they were always told that God would be faithful to them to the end. And then when the Messiah would come, there would be a renewal of life and faith, and there was that offer for people to take. And the fact that Jesus talks about the destruction of the temple was the reminder that there was going to be something greater than the temple to take shelter in. Something greater than the temple where worship would be concerned. Something greater than the law that governed how things were to go on in that temple. That what would happen is that it would be a new law, as the prophet said, that would be written on the heart, that would be a call to us to live in such a way that people would know that Jesus is here when they walk in those doors, or where 2 or 3 of us are gathered together and some stranger comes into our midst, that they would know that Christ was there. Just by the way we would treat that person, by the way we would accept that person, by the way we would speak to that person, or how we would speak about other people, or how we would look at the world and how we would share that view. That the love of God that's been poured into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, that's been given to us, and that makes us strong and loving and wise, will continue to shape us and mold us and make us what we have to be, so that we can play out our ministry and our mission in this world that we've been given. People have to come to know that Christians really do believe that we are called to love, and that God has shown the faithfulness of His own love through all these generations. Maybe sometimes harder to see than others, but yet that faithfulness is what has underlined His love for us all these centuries, all these more than centuries, eons, since the beginning. Some parishes, some denominations will disappear. It's always happened. And it will happen again. But they shouldn't disappear because nobody lives that faith. They should only disappear when there's no need for them anymore, because the mission has been fulfilled. As long as we remember that we are called to love and to serve, as long as we remember that we are the presence of Christ in our own way, according to our understanding of that in this place, we're not going to go anyplace. We're not going to disappear. No matter what stewardship does, no matter what the configuration of the parish will be, we're not going to disappear. Things may change, things may look different, but the mission remains the same. Maybe today, believing again in the promises and understanding that even if the stones are knocked over, that the fidelity of the Lord is still with us, and that we can trust in that love and faithfulness of the sacrifice offered once for us, that we participate in anew every time we celebrate the Eucharist, where we encounter once again the faithful Christ, the loving Christ, the giving Christ, who invites us to those same attitudes of heart, faithfulness, giving,